FullClarity is a native suite app, which means that we actually have to log in to NetSuite before we can access FullClarity. To do that, we put in our username and password and click Login. Once we're there, you'll be able to see our native dashboard within NetSuite. Over here on the far left, you see my reminders where I have bids to receive, pending projects, awarded projects, contracts to approve. We can also see various KPIs, indicators here, actual cost, revenue, and billings to date. If we wanted to drill into one of these areas, we could right-click or click on current or one of the numbers. If I do that, that'll take me over and allow me to see the actual details that make up and represent that number in the system. In addition, we also have projects in flight. We have our KPI meter, a couple of them, one for accounts payable and one for accounts receivable. We also have our top 5 customers. In the middle, you'll notice that we actually have our projects, and we can see where our actual projects are from a financial perspective, where we have the cost center we're coding against, our budget for cost, our margin percentage, our margin amount, and our projected sales price. Further down, you'll see our related opportunities for specific projects and opportunities that our sales team would be working on. And then we can also see a quick snapshot of all of the purchase orders by supplier. FullClarity offers the ability to look at timelines at a holistic view. We actually have what's called project timelines under our menuing system. And this is our project timeline for all projects in the system. If I scroll up, you can see all of my open projects here. And I've drilled into a specific project where it just illustrates the concepts of the different relationships we can have from finish to finish, finish to start, start to finish, and start to start. We support all of those industry standard relationships. We also support lead time or lag time. So you can see here I built in a 3-day lead time, and this is finishing when this one is finishing. So we can see these dependencies are defined in the system. The next area we're going to go into is our project overview. To start with, we're looking at a customer record. On that customer record, we've opened up the sales tab. Underneath the sales tab is a sub-projects tab. And on that tab, you can see our various projects for that specific customer. I'm going to open up this customer project 207. In that project, you can actually see the beginnings of our FullClarity functionality that we've added to the native project records. We have our drag and drop functionality for our additional file storage. We have our documents tab where you can actually see the ability to have additional files attached. You can add them here or through the drag and drop feature of FullClarity. We also have the ability to sort these by categories, and you can view them or open these files at any time. At the beginning, we have our numbers. These are the overview of the project. We have our project versus actuals. We have our revenue. We have our billing type. Our billing type has various billing methods that we support: time and materials, progress billing, milestone billing. We also have cost that we've captured on the project from a PO, from bills paid, and pending expenses. All are examples of details that we have available on our project. In the reports, we have the ability to drill into our job cost report, which I've right-clicked and opened that in a new tab. We also have our cash flow forecast. We're going to take a quick look at both of these. In our job cost report, you can actually see the details that make up my job cost profitability, my original budget, all of the change orders, so plus or minus change orders, gives me my revised or adjusted budget, my actual billings that I've done, my committed billings, and then my actual costs are down here. We can right-click and open these in a new tab or just click on them. We also see our total commitments, our over and under billings, our adjusted budget, our percent complete, and our percent complete actuals are all visible in the system. If I go to my cash flow report, this is an example where you actually have your forecast remaining, your cost that you're expecting to incur, and your total cash flow forecast. That's how much cost you've actually allocated in the forecast versus what was actually in the forecast. So if we look down here, we can see I have $3,000 allocated, but I have $4,900. So I want to add that past December. So I'm going to go ahead and extend my forecast out to 2025. When I do that, that will give me updated columns and allow me to scroll in that area where the green bars are to allow me to actually be able to see my forecast numbers. So here's my scroll bar. It allows me to scroll all the way out to that 2025 period. Now this line we're looking at is where I've allocated $3,000. I still have additional costs I need to allocate. So I'm going to go ahead and allocate $1,000 here. And you can see that updates to $4,000. It's going to be a couple more months after that before we finalize these costs. So I'm going to put the last bit of costs in that June column for 2025. I can now see my total cost is allocated against my forecasted budget in the system. We can also see our cumulative cost and our actual costs down here at the bottom. The next area we're going to go into is our estimating. When I go into our estimating, you're going to see that we actually have various projects in the system, and each project will have an estimating tab with estimates underneath it. The estimate gives us the ability to have various types. So we have an original sales estimate. That's our estimate we're working on before we close the project. Then we have our original project budget. That's the budget that we actually established from our sales estimates. You notice I have two in each one of these. That's because we may have a multi-part estimate in the system. We may have options that the client might be purchasing. In this case, I have my initial cost estimate and an add-on for a third garage in our garage scenario for this estimate. So what that would mean is I would end up with a estimate collection that combines those two estimates together in the system. So that's what this gives you. You also see I have a change order in the system as well. In my bid request, this gives me the ability to manage bids in the system, and we're going to talk about bids in just a little while. What I'm going to navigate to now is my original contract. So if I go into my estimates here, so on my estimates record, you can actually see I have my original estimates up here at the top. I'm going to go into one of these original estimates, and that gives me my initial cost estimate that I've already opened, and it allows me to see the inventory items that I've selected. So this gives me the ability to see where I can have a consumption of inventory, a transfer of inventory, a return of a transfer, a return to stock, or a cancel of those transactions in the system. Next, we actually have gone into our forecast for our estimates in the system. So as our forecasts evolve, we go from like our sales estimate we were looking at originally to our original budget to our forecast. And this is using our advanced forecasting. You notice this one's not locked. This is where we work and live once the project is live. This is my combined estimate where I can actually create a snapshot of what's going on for that month. So this gives me the ability to have a comparison at a month-end process in the system. You can also see I can right-click and have various options on my estimate, such as create a purchase order. In this, I have the ability to create a purchase order for a bid that's already been placed for Graybar and awarded to Graybar. That's one of my suppliers. And the bid response is from these quotes here for those three items in the system. When I right click here and say create order, this will automatically open a purchase order and give me the ability to edit or add to the purchase order for that specific supplier. If I right clicked on another line that didn't have a supplier allocation and I said create purchase order, this would allow me to choose my purchase order vendor and then the additional items to go on that purchase order. Because I've already awarded this through the bid process, we skip that selection step. So that's going to take us into our bid management. So if over in our bid management, we can see on our job, underneath our estimating, we actually have bid requests, and we have a slab material bid that we put out. If I open that up, you'll actually see my vendor bid request where I've submitted this to 4 different vendors. The vendors are listed up here at the top right, and the vendors that this is going to has unique records where their responses are captured. This is the Graybar response that we were just looking at. We can see the amounts that they've submitted and any additional comments. If I go into the system and hit send bid request, this will send out an email to my vendors. Obviously, they have to have a valid email address for them to get the actual email. In my demo system, all of those emails come to me. So here is the email that actually comes to the vendor with the vendor portal that they would be clicking into to respond to this bid. I'll move that back out of the way. I've already opened up that vendor portal. This is the vendor portal that vendor would get from me in this example for this project at this address, and they would be able to see any information that I put in for the bid, see their instructions, see any attachments that I've attached, which were previously attached to the job, and I selected to add to the bid. And then they would be able to provide numbers on the estimates of the details, drop any uploaded files they need to, put in any comments, any inclusion or exclusions. If they're not going to respond, they can choose to decline and provide a reason. Once they've responded to the bid, then that response gets captured on the bid, and underneath the bid, this is their bid response. So on the bid, this is their quote. This is where they're giving us our response for that bid. And this is their response that we've actually opened up here. We can see that we've actually gone through the various steps of accepting that bid, which is why these bid numbers that were provided and the file attachment. So I've actually got the ability to see a file attachment of the residential construction proposal that was submitted by Graybar. We can also see our budget categories and the items that they priced out in the system here as well. At that point, we can create a PO from here, or we can just go back to our original forecast that we were working on originally, which has that quote 107 and Graybar as the vendor or supplier, where I can then right click and say create purchase order, and this will allow me to go through the purchase order process. From there, we also have our contract management feature set. So back on the job, we have our contract where we're actually now done our bids, we've done our estimates, and we're going to create a contract for this project. So if I open that contract up, you can actually see the contract record in the system. and have access to the contract details. So this is an amalgamation of the sales estimate, the sales order, the actual proposal that goes out to the client, the ability to have all of those details, including the estimates and what any invoices or claims that we've created or change orders related to this actual job and the contract with this specific customer. We can see our original budget set up here, and we can also see the forecast we're working with on this actual project. From there, when I click on the contract view of the job, you actually have the ability to see a consolidated view of the project. So over here on the left, you see my categories, my items, my quote, my rate, and the amount, my base information from the original budget, plus or minus any change orders, gives me my combined estimated budget in the system for this specific project. If I go back to the contract itself and I look at the claims area, we can actually see claim 81, where we've actually generated my AIA form for this job. So this is the AIA form G731, which is related to the actual contract itself in the system, where I went up here and hit print. Again, this is the change order record where I can see the original change order amount and the amount that I'm submitting. We also have the claim that was created in the system. The claim gives me the ability to go in and have my invoicing process in the system. So this is going to create a traditional invoice, which is invoice 81, for the customer to pay us in the system. And these are the line items that we're billing. We can also see the amount we've invoiced and the billing method, which is progress billing. During the billing process or creation of a claim, we actually have the ability to automate this. When I click on update, we'll see what that automation looks like. This gives me the ability to see what I actually applied and said I'm billing for that whole slab portion. Maybe I wasn't going to bill for that. Maybe I only needed to bill 100% of that and 20% of the flat work. This progress billing allows me to put in a percentage, not just 100%, but whatever percentage we need to bill for this. We also see our retention or retainage amounts here in the system. That takes us to our next tab, which is retainage. On the job itself, our retainage tab, where we have our retainage set up for accounts receivable, where I'm holding back 10% or my customer's holding back 10%, and I've already got a retainage invoice of $800. Then I have my accounts payable, where I actually see that I have a retainage percentage on the accounts payable side where I'm holding back on my subcontractors 10%, and then a vendor bill retainage amount that I've held back already $500. So in the tabs down below, I have my FullClarity AP retainage withheld. So here's a withholding document that I'm holding back on a specific supplier, DBNG Limited. Then my AR retainage, which was held back on me for my customer from the claim that I showed you earlier. That takes us to our change order process. In our change orders, you have the ability to go in and have an estimate you have to create. So I'm going to either import an estimate or create an estimate. And when I do that, I'm going to create a change order here. If I go to the first tab here, you'll see this is my change order document that we're working with. And this is the variation of that change order in the system. So this is a drawdown contract versus a progress billing. It's the same process, but what I've done is create a specific variation here. So if I go open up that variation, I can see the change order here, and I can see the changes in the system for the original budget. So I can see that estimate's what it's associated to. And then from here, I can see a view worksheet, which allow me to see the changes, my original budget plus or minus my changes, give me my revised budget. And I can also create a draw from here as well, which is, in this case, instead of an invoice, it's a draw against a loan with a bank. This is my 731 form where I can see the total original project sum, my change order amount, and then the revised contract amount. So all of that data is readily available in the system. At this point, we need to go through our revenue recognition process. We've got cost in the system through our purchasing, through our payables, through vendor bills, and now I need to go through the revenue recognition process. And at that point, I'm just going to come in here and say, I've gone into FullClarity, Project Financials, and Revenue Recognition. This gives me the ability to see my revenue recognition. I'm going to look at the project we were just working on. I've got cost of $25.94 and billings, but I haven't earned all of that. I'm going to say that we've only earned 1% of this project. So we're going to say we're going to recognize 1%. So my recognized revenue is $13,000. My billings, but not earned, is $174,000, which means I have an AR invoice sitting out there for that amount, but I've only earned $13,000 of it. And then I'm going to go ahead and say how much cost I'm going to recognize. I'm going to recognize that $25.94 in the system. So this gives me the ability to recognize the cost I've incurred, the revenue I've recognized, and have real-time visibility to that. Now, from a project management perspective, we also need to look at a timeline. A timeline is specific to a single project, but across all projects as well. So in this case, instead of looking at under FullClarity, under timelines, all of my project timelines, which I showed you at the beginning, we're now going to look at a single project timeline. In this timeline, I've selected 4 lines that show me and highlight the different ancestor and descendant setups in the system. You can see all of these are spelled out here with the different highlighted lines. There's no lead time or lag time, so we don't have that showing here, but this does give you an example of how you can have your timelines in the system set up based on lead times as well as ancestors and descendants. This can be collapsed, so you can collapse this and roll it up and see all of the details, and anytime you need to open up a section, you can scroll through, you can choose a specific area, open it up, and look at a specific line. Let's go look at another example. This is for a solar farm example, and underneath here, I actually have my timeline Gantt chart that we'll open up in a second. But in order to show you some of our additional features, we also have roles where you can assign specific employees to specific roles and then assign those roles to the timeline itself. So this FullClarity functionality for timeline management supports the definition of roles assigned to template timelines, and then those be able to be populated at this level instead of having to edit every line on a timeline. If I want to open up a timeline for this project, I would open up this, click on it, and that'll open up in another tab. And you can see here where I have drilled into my ESS installation for this specific timeline for this commercial solar example. You can see my dependents here in the system. You can see where I have finish to start, finish to start. I may have a finish to finish with a 2-day lag. All of that data is readily available here. You'll notice here that I have several roles defined over here on the right for this one timeline. So what I'm going to do is right click and edit that line, and this gives me visibility to all of the activity going on here. I can see actual hours of 4, actual work of 5. I'll explain what that means in just a second. And I've noted as a project manager that this work is actually complete. From a resource allocation perspective, I've said my Excel contracting contractor is assigned to this work. I've assigned a piece of equipment to this work. I've also assigned those roles that we were looking at in the system, and they're on this project as well in this specific task. I've also assigned a crew. So a crew can be a group of employees that are working on a specific project. So you can have employees like I showed in roles, but we can also have crews and put employees in crews, or we can just have individual employees. When I assign a specific employee to a specific task, we automatically create a task in the system that employees have access to, and they would be able to click and see that they have a task they need to complete. This task can also be used in the time entry, coding against the project cost, and the timeline task. So I can see that I have 4 hours here. So why do I have 4 hours? Because this employee entered 2 timelines, one for 1 hour, one for 3 hours. This gives me visibility to the total of 4, which makes up the actual hours. However, you see we actually say actual work of 5. What does that mean? That means the project manager has recorded that the team has done 5 hours worth of work. So we're missing an hour's worth of work here. And we have visibility to all of that in the system. So that completes our presentation on timeline management and our native FullClarity functionality.